the City show that started in 2007 to now fast forward, it's 2011, and they got a deal with HDNet. So I was lucky enough to have my pro debut on HDNet. And then I also, had my first 4 pro fights, all 4 Titan Fighting Championships on HDNet. And luckily they were 4 finishes. There was, 2 TKOs and 2 submissions. So it kind of boosted me on the HDNet platform where Michael Schiavello was putting me over and getting behind me. And they did this, top 10 prospect list on HDNet. And I ended up getting number 1. And at the time when all that went down, around that time, I would say, maybe a few months later, 6 months later, the UFC, they announced that they're going to do 135-pound, Ultimate Fighter. It's going to be the first girl season ever. And a couple guys that I had fought, we stayed in touch, and they were all going to go try out. And so I went to the tryouts, and right away when I got to the tryouts, talking to the executives, I pretty much knew I was going to be on. And so I think it had a lot to do with just the HDNet exposure and going undefeated there with all finishes is probably what did it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, HDNet they were so good back in the day of having different, regional promotions on the forefront. I mean, Titan FC was doing thousands of people per show then too. So, I mean, that's a great platform for you. I mean, you were on the season, Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate, one of the more controversial seasons because everything Ronda Rousey does seems to stir up controversy. Let me ask you, Dana White, you hear horror stories about Dana White. I mean, just the type of person he is. And I mean,
not a good guy.
Not a good guy.
No.
That was my follow-up question. I mean, he's
a badass businessman, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But as far as the way he handles himself, you would think he was, like a young Mark Wahlberg. But he really comes across
the type of guy he is.
Yeah.
The type of guy Dana White is where he'll book a CM Punk versus a Mike Jackson, knowing that they're both 0-1 type caliber pros, knowing their capabilities, knowing what they bring to the table. And then when those guys go out and perform in the way that everybody knows, the only way they're capable of performing, he then goes to the press conference and shits on them. And it's like, dude, like that's a perfect example of who you are, where, you're this 50-year-old, CEO boss. You book this fight. You're the boss. It's not these guys' fault that they're brand new in MMA. You put them out on this platform. They look dumb, makes your show look dumb, and then you go yell at them. It's just like that's kind of like the best way to put it with him,
I believe Matt Serra once called Mark Lehman. He said he's an expert swimmer who's never gotten in the pool. And to me,
that's great.
That's exactly how I feel Dana White is. I mean, he does a lot of good, don't get me wrong, and for his business and charities, and I know he does stuff like that, but like you said, I mean, he put James Toney versus Randy Couture on pay-per-view. What did anybody think was going to happen? And then he goes and he knocks James Toney's skills. How do you do that? You book the fight.
Yeah, so, and you knew what he was capable of. But I mean, at the same time, too, it's like, hey, I'll keep it real, dude. Like, without you, this sport probably isn't where it is today. So you are a badass and admirable. And any dude who can make that kind of millions, I'm like, hey, you're pretty cool, But still, he's not the coolest guy, not the nicest guy.
Right, you're doing something right. And you hear, I mean, Jamie Varner always talks about how he felt like the UFC bullied him and speaking about contracts and stuff like that. So it's tough to and now the deal with ESPN Plus, it's on. I feel like, Dana White, like you said, he did so much for the UFC, but the decisions that he's made between Fox and now the ESPN Plus, like I would watch it religiously up until probably 2009, 2010, when you knew everybody on the card, and I feel like you can't really charge for these cards now because they're built on one name, and he's making as much money as possible. But I guess that's how he becomes a multimillionaire, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely growing and growing and growing. So it is what it is. I kind of, at this point now, with me being 12-3 as a pro and 5 fights in a row, I'm just trying to, get my next fight to be in the UFC. I'm not trying to, retire there or have a long career there. But other than using the UFC to kind of wrap up my MMA career as, hey, I made it to the pinnacle of the sport and finished out there. Which, as when I get done with everything, will be nice to have. Other than that, I don't really have much of a desire to work for a company like that,
Sure. And
it's cool.
you feel like your MMA career might be not coming to an end, but you want to finish out in the UFC. It seems like your excuse me, your professional wrestling career in such a short amount of time has really, had really taken off. You debuted at Evolve on Evolve 30, I believe, against Stephen Pena. And it was, it wasn't the longest match. I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes, but a standing ovation that night. And that was just, Evolve is so cool in that aspect where, just because you might not have heard of this person, it's not, a match that you don't have to watch. And they put you two guys together, newcomers to Evolve, and, it was just an absolutely awesome performance, and it's only taken off since then. How did you get into contact with Evolve being so new in the business?
Dude, it's all about, networking and then having like cool little highlight videos. Pretty much how it worked is, so I ended up going to a seminar in Illinois. It was an Eddie Kingston seminar. And, the person who was going to be the, standout of the seminar would get to be on the show, which is a show called Glory Pro. They're on independentwrestling.tv. And so, I went out to that seminar to just try to get my reps, get on another show. And I got on the show. The match I had was with a kid who was also in the seminar. And we ended up having a really, really good match. And the highlights that I made of it were just, a lot of me doing a lot of MMA stuff. It was real sharp. And so anyway, I had it online, and Matt Seidel DM'd me, and we had had a small relationship prior. His brother, Mike Seidel, is from Kansas City, and so me and Mike trained together a lot. And I had met Matt one time before, but we weren't really friends. And he DM'd me, and he's like, "Hey, dude, like, this shit's really good. I think Gabe Sapolsky would, be obsessed with this." He's like, "Are you interested in wrestling for Evolve?" And I was like, "Of course." And he's like, "Well, let me talk to Gabe. I'll try to put your name in and, get him to watch some of you." And Matt came back to me and was like, "Hey, Gabe said he liked the video and said if you want to, come out to a seminar or a tryout, he'd love to have you and take a look at you." And so at that point, I was just like, these seminars are working out well for me. I know I can go up and learn something. And so I invested the money on my own to go up to New York, went to a Roderick Strong seminar where Gabe was there and, did the seminar. And that was the night where he was like, "Okay, Sharkbait is the standout of this tryout / seminar. So tonight you'll wrestle Stephen Pena." And that's kind of how that all formed, was just, boom, just like that.
Wow. And Roderick Strong, I think one of the most underrated, best professional wrestlers walking the planet. So anytime anybody can learn from somebody like that, I think that's, absolutely fantastic.
Dude,
now,
cool.
Evolve has, I don't want to say a feeder system. I think it's a bad term, not a farm system, but Evolve is almost a gateway to NXT. And NXT sends their talent to Evolve, and kind of vice versa. That's, guys like Keith Lee and whatnot, they go on from Evolve to NXT. Now, you wrestled Arturo Huas. That, to me, anytime, you put an NXT guy against somebody, a guy like you, a guy like Kurt Stallion was doing it for a while, Darby Allin, too, was wrestling these guys from NXT, that has to feel like almost such a vote of confidence that these people, like the Gabe Sapolsky, have that kind of confidence in you to wrestle the NXT guys because, A, you can get a great match out of them, and, you could both look good. So do you take it that way, too? Do you feel like that's, kind of almost a pat on the back?
Yeah, I definitely, it makes me proud when you get to those Evolve shows in the back, you see how serious everything is ran, how much energy and passion Gabe puts into the stories in each match. And then also every wrestler on the card, they're very professional and serious. So when you're in that environment, it does make you feel real good and give you some confidence. But, one thing that's cool is, I feel like what I was saying earlier of my theory on I just have to, be different and making sure my martial arts gimmick is strong. I think that's probably the reason why I'm getting, the opportunities with Huas so quickly, because he's a martial arts guy, and here you have Sharkbait who's been pushing his martial arts stuff. So boom, here we go. Here's another reason why we could put him on something like that. So it's all exciting for me, dude. It's all feeling real nice. It's all working out.
Now, Bobby Fish, I'm a huge fan of Bobby Fish, and he's fought kickboxing before, and he posted recently on Instagram about how guys that are not martial artists or not true, they don't train in the martial arts, should not adapt that style. Allison K. Sienna had we talked about that too, how like it's cool to do MMA, but in professional wrestling, if you're not a mixed martial artist, maybe you shouldn't be throwing those MMA like low kicks or the spinning back elbows and stuff like that. How do you, because I know a guy who's, trained mixed martial arts for so long, if it almost makes you cringe, right? Is it just me?
No, I totally get that. I think pro wrestlers are, crazy to not even, I'm not saying go be MMA fighters, or I'm not even saying, go grab the MMA skills and implement it into your, tool set. But I'm so shocked on how few pro wrestlers want to train jiu-jitsu and want to train kickboxing, at least just casually, because, you learn so many cool things and, that are involved in fighting that you never knew. And as a successful pro wrestler, if that's who you are, your brain's going to start like firing with ideas and, I'm not going to do it like this, but at least this footwork will help me with this. And you know what I mean? And like your chain wrestling, you'll get a lot of ideas in jiu-jitsu. And so, yeah, I think that, pro wrestlers just period should train in some sort of shoot style, that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock was he grew up doing it, and then he was a professional wrestler and then an MMA fighter. And the reality that he was able to bring to his character, I mean, and the intensity in the mid-90s to me, or the late 90s, I should say, that's what made Ken Shamrock and made everything look so real, and you hadn't really seen somebody do it before then. Dan Severn was doing it on a lower scale in the NWA and things like that, but that, and I think that's where the business is kind of going, because no disrespect to Alberto Del Rio, but when I saw him lock in the straight arm lock, I mean, sometimes you look at it and you're like, that looks absolutely terrible. And then you have guys like you, but also not for nothing, you're an MMA guy doing running, shooting star presses. So, you're not pigeonholed to one style. So I think that's what's so interesting about Evolve. And Evolve truly is the ability to blend your styles and become better by wrestling people that, if you go top to bottom on the Evolve card, you have monsters like Josh Briggs. You have smaller dudes like the Kurt Stallion. You have the All Japan-esque guys like Eddie Kingston. I think it's so cool because you're able to wrestle and, get experience in each different style that a lot of other rosters really don't have.
Oh man, I'm so lucky to be at Evolve. It's, it's just, it's so cool. They'll fly me out. They pay for the which I know a lot of indie pro wrestlers get this treatment. So they're, any successful wrestler was listening to this, they'd be like, oh, whatever. But it's just so crazy that they're, they send me these, expensive plane tickets for free and hook me up with a hotel and the per diem. And you get, match notes in your email of these paragraphs of what Gabe is looking for. And, it's just really, it's really cool that pro wrestling feels like it could be a real career, as opposed to like my whole time wrestling on the indies has just been kind of this shit's wild. Like, let's keep trying to get better,
Right. And there were guys,
I feel like it's different.
Now, I think with the advent of social media and all these different platforms, it's so much easier to get, like you said, you put together a really sick highlight reel, and that's how somebody got in touch with you. So, and now you don't just have to be in the WWE to make a living out of it. You don't have to be in WCW, in 2000 just to make a living out of it. Now there are so many different ways, and with Evolve being on the WWE Network for their 10th anniversary show, I mean, there's no better exposure for a professional wrestler than Evolve on the WWE Network. Is that something, I know you said you want to fight at least once in the UFC. What's your goal as far as pro wrestling goes? Are you looking to make that jump to NXT and then to WWE, or are you, willing to go anywhere? Oh yeah. My main goal is to win the Cruiserweight 205 Live belt, and then also do something, somewhat impactful and into NXT. Now, I know I got a long way to go and I got a lot of learning to do. And, that's with the thing that's interesting about pro wrestling is, you've seen crazier things where that could come out of nowhere real quick, or I could have another 3, 4, 5, 6 years, nose to the grindstone. But, my goals is the 205 Live Cruiserweight picture and then the NXT picture. That's really all I'm looking at right now. And obviously, I'd like to go even farther than that. But I think those are realistic things for me in the near future if I just keep working. Sure. Yeah, you set the long-term, the short-term and the long-term goals. Speaking of short-term goals, this weekend Evolve, we have Evolve 137 on Friday night and Evolve 138 on Saturday. I believe Evolve 138, you are scheduled for a rematch with Arturo Huas, which is going to be, if you saw the first match, it was super hard-hitting. It was super just enjoyable, slick, hard-hitting, fun match to watch. But Evolve 137, we don't have a match yet. Any idea? Do we have breaking news? Do we know who we're wrestling this week?